believe we have a quorum. So I can at least call this meeting to order. This is the Sherborn Advisory Committee public meeting of February 17th, 2021. First off, are there any advisory members who can volunteer to take minutes? Wasim, thank you. All right, so first we'll do the meeting agenda and roll call. So right now we have myself, Stephen Tsai, Peter Galatano, Jane Matarazzo, Brendan Daly, and Wasim Basili. And again, we are missing, let's see, Steve Leahy, Natalie Weir, Mark Albers, and Dhruv Kushal. If anybody could just shoot a text over to Steve and Natalie, just make sure that they didn't forget about the meeting. Thank you. Great. So our agenda, 7 o'clock, reading of the agenda, addition of topics not reasonably anticipated. I actually have two topics to add. One is the recreation had an item that they wanted to talk to us about, and then the treasurer had an item that she wanted to talk to us about. So we're going to add those two items to the tail end of the agenda. And we should also probably talk about our schedule in March, as we have 2 meetings scheduled in March, but we don't actually have agenda items for them yet, and we have a few things that probably need to go on there. Among them, select board and legal budget was supposed to be discussed today, but apparently the select board has not actually discussed and approved their budget yet, so they are not prepared to present that to us. So we're going to have to reschedule the select board, which will make this meeting a little bit shorter, which is good. So those are the additional topics. Does anybody from advisory have any other additional topics to add? All right, thanks. And then follow-up items, reports from liaisons. And then today we are budget discussions, and the budgets we're discussing are going to be the Council on Aging, Elder Housing, Conservation, and Town Forest. Then approval of previous meeting minutes and adjourning the meeting. Does anybody from advisory have any problems with the agenda? No. All right, then we'll move on to liaison reports. Do any of the advisory members have anything to report from any of their committees that they liaison with? All right, seeing nothing, then we'll move on. So current meeting. Is it?
That's better.
Did
Okay.
everybody exit the building?
Sorry.
Wow, that woke us up.
That usually only happens when I'm cooking.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
I was just like, I'm talking, and every now and then people nod or shake their head, and nobody's saying anything. I'm like, something's wrong.
And
Something
our
is
eyes
wrong.
are bugging out, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. All right. So did everything that I said just not happen, basically? I don't,
Correct.
I don't
We
want to have
got
to
up to liaison reports and there weren't any.
Okay, no liaison reports. All right, so current meeting items. So we've got budget discussions. We have the Council on Aging, Elder Housing, Conservation, Town Forest, and then approval of previous minutes, and then adjourning the meeting. And so, as I had said, the Select Board and legal is not going to happen today because the Select Board has not gone over their own budget yet. So we're going to have to delay that. So I guess we can start with the Council on Aging, and I do see we have a couple of people from the Council on Aging here. So if one of you wants to take the floor, we've got your budget here, and you can go ahead. Go ahead.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sue Kelleher. I'm the director of the COA, and we have Renee Montella. She's our assistant director. We have Jerry Hahn, our treasurer. I think Tricia was on. She's our vice chair, and possibly Chris Winterfeld is our chair. So we took the budget. We kept it basically the same flat as asked to keep it as closest to last year's budget as possible, which we did. We didn't really change. I mean, we changed some of the buckets, but we kept in line with what we asked for last year.
Yeah, I can see that. Can you, real quick, because on our budget, it's we have a FY22 request and then an FY for salaries and then an FY22 revised. Can you just explain what happened there?
Yeah, so for the assistant director position, we did last year when we put it in, it was over budget. So what we did last year is we took 5 hours from our lifetime learning program because the assistant director spends a lot of time on that program. So from her 25 hours, 20 of it is covered by the town, and then 5 additional hours are taken out of our lifetime learning bucket. Then last year we had a program that was it was a 5-hour a week program. It was for our lunch, our daily lunch, our weekly luncheons. And obviously with COVID that we didn't use that. And then we needed to hire a new elder advocate. That position was 16 hours and it got bumped up to 19 just because of the need has increased among the population. And we eliminated the 5-hour position and put it towards the elder advocate and 2 hours towards the assistant director position, but keeping the salaries in line with what we asked for last year.
Okay. Okay. I see that now.
So the total hours for the assistant director are 27.5, but 5 of them are being covered by lifetime learning. Is that correct?
Correct. So 22.5 would be covered by the town budget.
Okay.
And is that, was there also a pay increase involved there, or is that looks like it might be more than the 2%, although I don't.
Nope, we
Okay,
didn't.
it's just the
We
2%.
kept everything with the 2% recommendation.
Okay.
All right. Does anyone from advisory have any additional questions about the salaries? No. And then with the expenses, I know it's flat, but basically you were kind of shifting some money from here to there.
Yeah,
Is there
just
is
where
there
we,
anything noteworthy there that you want to talk about, or are you just kind of like,
no, we, decreased the transportation budget, just because, people hadn't been using as much of it this year, and plus we had a grant, and we're hoping to get another grant, but we still have enough money to cover it, so we moved that into a different bucket so we could, offer more programming and outreach, community outreach and support.
okay. Yes, Jerry.
I just wanted to mention that we did increase the budget for space rental. In the past, we've paid Pilgrim Church and St. Teresa Church for use of their facilities. And we've also paid a much smaller amount to the Unitarian Church occasionally, as well as Unity Farm. But we have many, many more programs now than we've had in the past. And we do anticipate that we're going to have greater need for additional space rental. So we increased that line item by 750, but it was offset by decreases in other areas.
Sure. All right. Well, I think the overall budget looks pretty good to me. Does anybody from advisory have any additional questions or comments? Great. And now, any departments that have potential warrant articles, if you want, you can also present them to us today. But I know your warrant articles are sort of in some flux, right?
Yeah.
But we have placeholders for meetings on March 3rd and March 10th to try to
Okay.
collect all of this. So I would, we haven't decided. Obviously, at some point you'll get an email from either myself or Jane Matarazzo to kind of sort out which of those meetings you guys will present your.
Okay, thank you.
Great.
So
And
quick, sorry,
and you
Steve.
guys don't have any capital requests, right?
No.
Okay. Did you something?
Yeah, sorry. Earlier, I wanted to make a comment, but two unmute buttons takes a long time. So, quick question about the account, the lifetime learning. That's coming back next year, right?
Yes, we did it this year. We just did it remote.
Okay.
We did
But
offer lifetime learning this year, but it was all on Zoom.
okay. So, but there was like a number of hours from lifetime learning that are going towards
The salary.
other positions, but that's probably going to come back next year, right?
Yeah, we did it this year too. We funded that position because the assistant director spends a good amount of time putting together the program. So we did that last year and we're doing it again for this budget.
Got it. Got it. Okay. Thank you.
Do you anticipate that you will continue doing that sort of indefinitely into the future?
We hope so. We don't, it would depend on enrollment for the program. It's one of our money makers, so we're hoping that that will carry on.
All right, well, last call for questions from advisory. Nothing. All right, I think we're all set with you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next up we have elder housing. And I see Kitty is here.
Good evening, Steve. May I quickly do a roll call? Because I did post us, because I thought we'd be more than 3.
Oh, yes, absolutely, absolutely.
Okay, Mike, are you here? Thank you. And Steve, you're here? I'm here. I don't know if Janet was able to make it tonight or not. Or David Curtis. Okay, I'm all set there. Could I make an opening statement, Steve,
Yep.
before we start? I had a very nice email from Jane regarding different items within our budget, and I wanted to address those up front. Over in the last 8 or 10 years that I've been on this committee, we have been paying the town for services that they have provided for us, and it is part of our budget. And that has included the rubbish or trash, insurance, and CM&D or DPW. I understand that rubbish now has a full town contract, but we anticipate that we will be paying our portion of that bill, and we will pay it directly to the town. And I believe Sharon can better explain how our funds come into her office, and they get applied to they go to the general fund. There's no swapping between two budgets. It's just to the general fund. That's the way we've always done it. Also, I believe in the last 8 years, we've been paying a fee for service to the town. I believe you're aware of how the calculation is arrived at. And I believe this is a good deal for the Woodhaven residents, and I think it's also a good deal for the town of Sherborn. And if I may, I'd like to turn the description of the budget over to Steve and Mike, and they're more in tune with it than I am. Thank you.
All right, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. I'm assuming you have the budget in front of you.
Yep.
There have not been any major changes to it, except obviously one big one that we have added, the 90,000 for re-roofing all 3 buildings. They're now almost 40 years old, and they are in need of roofing. And that's probably going to be the major discussion for us tonight as to whether this is our money or we pay it out of our budget. We had hoped and planned to pay it right out of our budget. We can do that, but I think that's where the discussion is going to be. Otherwise, there really aren't any major changes as you'd be able to see. So I think I'll just let you ask questions, and we can take it from there.
Sure. I did want to kind of circle back to what Kitty had mentioned about the fee for services and the rubbish removal. I think mostly we just want to make sure that the numbers that we have for the rubbish removal and fee for services, that we understand where those numbers are coming from and how they're calculated. And then we want to be able to basically just kind of like double check with the DPW budget, or essentially just make sure that something isn't either getting lost in that translation or getting double counted in that translation.
Yep.
Steve, if I may interrupt,
Sure.
that number for DPW has been presented by them to us. It
Okay.
started with Ed Wagner, and he gave us one figure, I think 5 years ago, and he kept saying, use the same figures last year. And this year, unfortunately, Sean did not have the time to properly look at it, and they don't actually keep track of, they sent a man to shovel the walks for us for 4 hours. They haven't been keeping that kind of track, but we had some sense of the kind of labor that was being expended on the behalf of DPW for us. And this has been a tough winter because of snow, where we didn't have it last year. I'm through.
Okay. So effectively that number, which in FY22, it's $20,546, that essentially that began as some number 5-ish years ago from Ed Wagner, and it's just kind of gone up incrementally, presumably.
No, Steve, that 20,000 fee for service includes an assessment against the buildings that we pay plus DPW.
Taxes plus the number that came from Sean.
I see. Okay. Okay.
Well, the tax part of it is 10,029, and the CMD 11,548 as it has been, and that's where your 20,546 comes out.
I see. Okay. Okay. So
Sorry,
you're
Mike,
just
can I just ask you to, I didn't, can you just say that number again? How much of that is the DPW piece?
$11,548.
Okay.
and you just get that number from DPW and you just insert it,
Yeah,
basically,
that's
right?
what I was just referring to, that we haven't really generated a number every year, but we're close enough. And should we need additional, I think, you know, we'll cover the bases when should that occur. But we've used that number and been pretty happy with it so far.
But if I understood Kitty correctly in terms of how the logistics work, is this correct? Have I understood this correctly? That Sean gives you a number, you budget for that number. Sean is presumably including that number in his budget because those are real costs to him and his budget.
Right.
And then when you pay back the town, you do so by making a deposit into the general funds, not by sending the money over to back to DPW.
We've had no crossing between departments.
Okay.
Booked as miscellaneous income.
So that
Okay.
11,000 is basically in both your budget and Sean's budget then, right?
I can't speak to what is actually in Sean's budget, but that's the number we have been using to represent our responsibility to DPW or CM&D.
Okay. Well, that makes sense. I mean, I think as long as we know that, okay, the amount of money that theoretically is in the books for services DPW provides is in this budget, and it is a number that comes to you directly from DPW, I think that we can then basically bring that back to Sean and just confirm that is somehow accounted for. And then, and I guess, okay, so same thing with the rubbish removal. That's, where this really came up, it was that that number went up in Sean's budget. And he said, oh, and that's because DPW is now taking over that from for Woodhaven. And we were like, oh, so does that, we were confused by that. So
Steve, you were confused. I wasn't told about it until yesterday.
Yeah.
But we feel, I feel it's Woodhaven's responsibility to pay whatever the charge for Woodhaven is. And this is what Ruane and Fathers has been charging. The fee was at $13.41 was the fee that they said they would be charging us for this coming year.
And
I'm sorry.
wait, so you guys are paying that directly to Ruane and Father?
Well, we now would be paying it to the town if the town is then therefore drawing a check to pay on a monthly. I don't know how they're doing it. I know nothing about this contract. But that $13.41 would be our responsibility to be paying to the town for the services provided,
Okay.
instead of paying Ruane and Father as we have done in the past.
13,000 or 1,300?
1,341.
41.
Is
So
that-
that's the only differential this year.
Well, I don't want to take it out of the budget because it's part of our budget.
No, yeah, I just meant in terms of
Yeah.
on the DPW side.
That, yes, that's the added. Yeah,
Yeah,
and we also pay the town for the portion of the insurance bill that is ours. We get, Diane provides us in April with the number that is our responsibility, and that's another thing that goes into the general fund.
So Sharon, do you know then, is this rubbish removal line that 1,341, is that the line that corresponds to where Sean was saying his number is going up for rubbish removal?
Yes, so instead of paying whoever that vendor was, this now will be paid to the town. So Sean incorporated that into his budget, which he hadn't in the past. In the past, it was independently budgeted for by Woodhaven.
So Sharon, when these deposits come into the general fund, is that all accounted for in your, other available funds calculation?
Yes, yep, it's miscellaneous receipts that actually show up under the select board department.
Oh, so this is different from the stabilization fund elder housing money?
That's a whole different ballgame.
Whole different thing.
So then where is this accounted for again? In the select board?
Yeah, it's under their department, but it's under miscellaneous receipts.
Okay. So it's accounted for as receipts, not as other available funds.
It's miscellaneous income.
So if I try to tie that back to some of the budget model stuff you've sent, would it be in the miscellaneous non-recurring that is projected at about 57,000 for this year?
Yes. Yep.
So if I may, and I'm sorry, Katie, that we're getting a little bit sidetracked here, that we're not directly talking about your budget right now, but it is just in how it relates to Sean's budget. But Sharon, I'm pulling up, I think it was the transfer station budget where this came up, and I believe it's this line transfer station disposal that went from 90,000 to 100,000. Is that, Jane, do you remember, is that the line that?
That sounds right. I mean, the numbers seemed different to me. I thought we were talking about a bigger number than 1341.
Well, that's the thing, is that it was a large number in Sean's budget. And we were like, well, what's that? And he was like, this and that, and Woodhaven. And we're like, wait, Woodhaven? Like, don't they take care of their own? And he was like, no, the town's doing it now. And we're like, wait, what? So that's the problem, right? Is that there's a big number and there's multiple things that make up that number, and nobody knows what those things are and how much they are. And I guess that's why we're here now talking about this. Is one component of that number, I believe, is Woodhaven. And so we're just trying to figure out, because it was a $10,000 increase from 21 to 22, and the elder housing component of that is 1,300. So then it becomes, okay, well, what was the rest of that? So I just wanted to confirm that this is in fact the line that we're talking about, which is disposal, which in FY21 budget was 90,000 and FY22 is 100,000. And do you know, Sharon, is that the line that we're talking about? You're muted, Sharon.
There you go. Yes, that is my understanding. I don't know why it went up so much.
Yeah, neither do we.
Kitty,
Okay.
did your contractor come up with a big increase for waste removal?
They presented the same prices we were paying last year.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's probably just something that we'll have to sort out with Sean. Unless anybody else from advisory has a brilliant insight into it.
I don't, but there was a lengthy conversation about the substantial increase in the costs for recycling, primarily recycling. So it could be the case that Sean just wanted to account for, for that. So recycling now costs more than regular trash to dispose of. Right. Whereas in the past that was not the case.
That's the cost of the recycling being removed from the transfer station, though.
Oh yes, you're right. You're right. Sorry.
And this is about
yes, you're right.
The removal of everything.
So I have a very basic question for Woodhaven and elderly housing. When costs go up 21% year over year, how does that affect the subsidized and non-subsidized rents?
Good question. Actually, we've been, I think we've been holding fairly close to a 3 to 4%
Yeah,
increase.
yeah.
Uh,
Peter, you said 20%. Are you looking at just this year's?
Yes, just this year's.
This year's is a major increase because we have that $90,000 for re-roofing in our budget, which so that's a major percentage increase that normally we have not seen. We've had no problem maintaining our expenses through rentals so far.
I see. And for the roof, what distinguishes a capital expense from an operational expense? 90,000, it exceeds the dollar amount. The lifetime of the roof tends to be 15 to 30 years. So is that within your discretion to go operational or capital?
Yeah, go ahead.
I would ask Sharon to answer that question from the auditors. Thank you.
Yeah, that is, it's a management decision. These revolving funds are highly regulated. And in terms of funding the roof in 1 year with $90,000 or going out and doing a long-term loan, it's absolutely a management decision. So either one is a possibility.
Thank you.
But as I understand from Sharon, the roof will be recorded as a capital improvement within her audit papers, correct?
Yes, there is a special accounting for all capital assets. And we amortize them over the useful life. So that does impact the balance sheets.
So Sharon,
It's not something that Mr. Gordon wants to make a decision. Really, what quote in his email, management decision.
right. I guess my question in that then is, who is the manager who makes that decision? Is it the Elder Housing Committee that has the ultimate say on that?
I would believe so, yes.
Okay.
And they approve this budget.
Okay. So then basically does the Elder Housing Committee, you guys are choosing then to simply pay for the roof outright out of your revolving fund budget this year?
That's correct.
Okay. All right. Does
Guys, I just wanted to, I don't know if you guys had any questions for me. I'm logged on as my wife.
oh. Yeah, Sean, we were discussing the rubbish removal fee, because I think that had come up when we were talking about the transfer station budget, where I believe I think that it was in your line that was hang on, I think I've closed it now. There was a line that went from 90,000 to 100,000, and I think you had said that part of that was due to the town was now paying for the rubbish removal, and then subsequently getting reimbursed by elder housing. Is that accurate?
Well, the accurate statement would be anything elder housing had budgeted is going to be gone, because we absorbed that into the contract between them and the town.
So which contract is this? because I think with Woodhaven, it was Ruane and Father, and they were paying Ruane and Father. Is this a different thing that we're talking about?
No, it's the same contract because Ruane and Father is the contractor that runs the operation at the transfer station.
Yeah.
So it's just absorbed into that contract.
Okay. So then, all right. So it's absorbed in. Okay. So then that means. Good night. Breaking. So then breaking out that James, buddy, I'm sorry, man. I got.
He just disappeared.
Yeah.
That was awesome.
This
He
is
flew into spaceship.
good night. Yeah, this is unfortunately the favorite part of his evening on Wednesdays now is Zoom bombing our meeting.
It's awesome.
So okay, so essentially Woodhaven is now getting absorbed into that contract for the town with Ruane and Father. And essentially we can just say that some amount of that is paying for the rubbish removal at Woodhaven. And they have told Elder Housing to put in a number of 1,341 into their budget. So we can basically just assume that they consider that to be the portion that they're responsible for. Does that sound right?
To me?
Yeah.
Did I mute? Yeah, that does sound. That,
Okay.
Yeah, I think it was 12 something this past year. I'm not sure exactly what it was, but yes, that should just net out. It should not be carried into fiscal 22.
All right, that sounds good. And then the other thing in this budget that we were discussing, which sort of touched on DPW, was the fee for services, which it says it includes DPW charge for snow removal and lawn care. So that is a number. I think they said that the portion from DPW was $11,548 this year, and we just wanted to sort of confirm that was a number that made sense to you and is accurate.
Yeah, whatever we reviewed. I mean, a portion of that is snow and ice, and we don't even. I mean, for the entire town, we don't account for snow and ice, as you know very well.
Right.
So to try to account for it at Woodhaven is no less difficult than for the entire town.
Yeah.
I just want to clarify one thing though. So the rubbish removal, what we're going to do is change that to rubbish removal to the town of Sherborn. We'll add that to that, the funding that goes right to the general fund for the town, correct?
Okay, yes.
Okay.
All right. Yeah, so I mean, the main thing I think we just wanted to make sure that when there was some sort of an intersection of services between DPW or the town at large and elder housing, that the numbers that were being inserted into both budgets sort of made sense, that there was a basis for them, they came from somewhere, and that they were in alignment, as in that the numbers matched. So that was, I think that was mostly our question. So I think just moving forward, year after year, we just want to try to make sure that if the DPW is, if you guys, Sean, if you are sort of making some sort of an assessment of, okay, well, the amount of stuff that we did for elder housing is worth X amount of money, and you put that into your budget, give that number to the Elder Housing Committee, and then they'll insert it into their budget. And we just want to make sure that happens and that it's clear where that is. Does that make sense?
Yes. To me. Yeah.
All right.
A question for Sharon, but when we do supplementals for snow and ice, do we deduct from the amount that we're charging the taxpayers the amount of the portion of that is attributable to Woodhaven, which is being paid for by Woodhaven?
Oh, we do a supplemental for the total amount that we exceeded our operating budget. And we traditionally funded that with free cash.
That would be really hard to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess technically we're not taxing anybody directly for that, right? Because it's free cash. I mean, indirectly, at some point, some of that money that's in free cash may have been raised from a previous tax levy, right? But at the end of the day, we aren't saying, okay, snow and ice costs this much, therefore we're going to have to tax people this much more, assuming that we use free cash for it. So trying
Even
to
if you
tease
didn't
all,
use free cash, it's still a surplus on a revolving fund where they're dumping money back into the general fund either way.
true, right?
It would be incredibly, and it would be intensive for me to try to track what I spend at Woodhaven and snow and ice versus the rest of the town.
So then Sharon, when you account for the other available fund or for the receipts that will be the Woodhaven receipts, is that, what do you build an estimate? So you go to the amount that Woodhaven has budgeted for town services, and that's the number you use there? Is that how it works?
Yes, correct.
So this year it would be the like 11,548 plus 1341. Is there anything else?
1341 fee for service, 20,546. And also 2,827, which is the insurance piece.
The insurance, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So the whole 20,000 goes in,
Yes, it does.
even though
That-
only 11,548 is DPW.
Yes. The other portion is what, taxes?
Yes,
Yeah, property taxes, yeah.
on the buildings.
Yes.
Could I ask what the occupancy, vacancy and turnover was in 2020? Did you see any anomalies due to COVID?
None, thank God. We are fully occupied. We were fully occupied at the beginning of the fiscal year. And to this point, we had one death, but it was not attributable to COVID, and another couple moved right in. So I think we may have had 20 days of vacancy in one apartment this year.
And we have a significant waiting list.
Have all the units been renovated from that initial project? I remember hearing that one.
I believe we still have 5 units left, but they still have the residents that were in that apartment when we took on the bond issue. So when they move out, then we will redo that apartment. And I can't quote how much is left in the bond issue, but there's still money left in the bond issue. But we pay the principal and interest every year.
Thank you.
And I had requested a placeholder for the stabilization fund. We will not request any funding of that this year.
Okay. All right, does anybody from advisory have any more questions or comments about the elder housing revolving fund? All right. Seeing nothing, I think we're all set with you guys.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you very
Thank you
folks.
very much.
Thanks. Have a good evening.
Don't be up too late.
Yeah.
I'll try. All
Mr. Chair,
right.
if you don't need me, I'm checking out too. I was trying to be on the Dunkin' Donuts thing with the Historic Commission. You don't need me, do you?
No, I think we're all set with you. Thank you so much
All
for
right.
coming in, John. Thanks.
Thanks, guys.
Yep. Bye. All right. Next up, we have Conservation Commission, and let's see. We have Neil, and we've got Kelly here, and my wife is on the Conservation Commission, so I am going to mostly recuse myself from this discussion. I'll just kind of moderate to keep things moving along if necessary. But
Steve, let me introduce it, and I'm sorry that Groove isn't here because he gave us a lot of advice and assistance. We really appreciate it. Please pass that on.
Will do.
And Neil Kessler is our chairman. Jean Bednar is our vice chair. And I just really want to do a quick introduction. We tried to keep the budget request within guidelines. I think it is. Some money is modestly moved from here to there. Actually, I'm not even sure that that's true. But no increase over last year except for the 2%. And I think we prefer to respond to your questions than try go through the justification that we submitted.
All right. Anybody from advisory have any questions or comments?
Can you remind us what the line item called special projects is for, which has a similar 21 and 22 number of 6,440?
Yes, this is Jean Bednar's baby. It's been extremely successful, the commission thinks, but let me ask her to explain it.
You're on mute, Jean.
You have me now?
Yep.
The $6,440 is what we sought last year to have 2 inventories conducted on 2 parcels of conservation land. These were ecological and botanical inventories as well as historical inventories. And we did send the product of that to you a few weeks ago. I hope you saw it, had a chance to look at it. We are requesting the same amount to do 2 more parcels in the next fiscal year. And the reason we're asking to do 2 parcels is it addresses a long-term goal for us. We have 800 acres of land we're supposed to be managing. And there are 6 or 7 most significant parcels of conservation land based on how popular they are and how much use they get. So, but each parcel is ecologically and botanically very different, and each parcel poses different management issues. So what we're hoping to gain by doing 2 more is a wider breadth of knowledge of all the possible management issues that can come up with such diversity of land. The ecologists that we employed for the last inventories, which were for Bailey Trail and Leyland Mill Pond, come from Western Massachusetts. They are very highly regarded throughout the state, throughout New England. And the price of $64.40 for 2 parcels is a savings because of the travel time and the amount of effort it takes. They would be charging us more if we were only asking to do 1 parcel at a time.
So can I also just jump in real quick and make a comment? I've got a couple of background.
Neil sound really weird to everybody else, or just me?
Yeah, Neil, you sound very strange.
You sound demonic.
Is that any better?
No, it's not better.
That's not better?
Oh,
Okay.
now it's better. Okay.
Okay, sorry about that. I took my headphones off. I just said if I have a puppy in the background who's, so if he starts barking, I'm gonna have to get out of here and talk to you there. But I just wanted to add a little bit that I think one of the main sort of reasons that we're continuing with our inventories is we've just seen a tremendous amount of increase in land use since the pandemic started. And we don't really see it abating even when the pandemic does, only because once people have discovered the greatness that we have as conservation lands here in Sherborn, we just foresee that need continuing. And just as an example of trying to balance, certain lands in town, they're mostly for passive recreation use. And for us, we're always trying to balance conservation uses, conservation purposes, ecological ones with passive recreation, because that's just what conservation land is. And so, for example, we've been dealing a lot with sort of people creating mountain bike trails where they weren't before, creating hazards. And so these kinds of inventories on our biggest, most important, most highly used parcels are going to be something that's going to serve us well in doing planning to balance passive recreation, which we want to encourage with conservation, and also just ensure safety. So it's a continuation of that work that we feel is kind of, been long overdue, but we're excited to be doing it because the first two products from this past year have been fantastic.
Not to fail to mention also that inventorying the land that we are entrusted with managing is one of the goals of the help me out here, guys, what's it called? The master plan.
Yes.
Thank you both. Just curious, what two areas or plots are they doing this year?
Peters Hill and Hidden Meadow.
I would comment about Peters Hill. It's right next to the Coolidge Street developments, and it's going to, over the next year, see a massive increase in use, and we know very little about it. Also, the developers have suggested they would invest in some improvements at Peters Hill to satisfy this need. And it would behoove us to know more about what we would ask them to do.
And last question, is this something you envision going forward in additional years beyond next year?
Well, as I said, we have 800 acres to manage, but we have significant distinct parcels that are the most popular and the most heavily used. And so they number either 6 or 7, depending on how you evaluate them. So getting 2 more done this year, I suppose my hope is that we would eventually get all 6 or 7 inventoried to help us make better management decisions overall.
But it is not long-term indefinite.
Understood. Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Does anybody else from advisory have any questions or comments about the Conservation Commission budget?
I didn't, oh, go ahead, Westing.
Please go ahead, Peter.
I didn't have a chance to read last year's report, but what were some of the action items that were valuable to the Conservation Commission from those 2 reports for that one report for those 2 parcels?
Jane?
Okay, so for Bailey Trail, which abuts Old Orchard Road and gets very significantly used by the people in that neighborhood, we discovered from the inventories that there is a pocket of land in the middle of that parcel that has almost rare characteristics, ecological characteristics. And this is something that it's very important for us to know about in order to determine how to manage that area in particular. Also at Bailey Trail, it was noted, something that's fairly obvious if you go to Bailey Trail, but it was noted that it was heavily hit by, the tree kill is pretty extensive at Bailey Trail based on the winter moth and the gypsy moth. And so we received good feedback on how to, going forward, how to manage that area now that the trees have died, and it will start to receive a tremendous more sunlight. So different communities will adapt there and spring up. So keeping an eye on that is also a very important future consideration. Another example I can think of at Leyland Mill Pond, which is a somewhat small, somewhat sensitive parcel of land off of Mill Street. It's sensitive because it's extremely wet, but when you go there, there's a fantastic view of the mill pond, which now is getting significantly obstructed by the growth of an invasive plant called buckthorn. So we were advised on how and where to try to ameliorate that problem so that the benefit of having a view of the pond can be enjoyed in the future.
Thank you. That was helpful.
And Wasim, did you have something?
Well, thank you for that answer. That almost answered my question. I was like, what the output of that report, is this something that people exploring these lands can benefit from, or is it for you, for the management of the land? It sounded like it, there's a large part of it is to manage the land, right?
Absolutely. And I guess it has to be said that the Conservation Commission has two jobs. One is to carry out and administer the Wetlands Protection Act, and the other is to manage these properties. And the Wetlands Protection Act is driven by law and a very tight time frame. And so it's been true for years that the Conservation Commission struggles to have the time to be able to address land management, despite the fact that it's very important to us. And so this will help us getting towards that goal.
Let me add, Wasim, that in addition to the management recommendations for us, these reports are really informative and really interesting. And we hope they will be educational items for people in town who care about these resources. We'll be making them available.
Yeah, I would add to that also that like Tom Trainer had requested just some information from us about the history of Leyland Mill Pond, and we basically, hot off the press fed him that report, and his response was, nothing short of, "Oh my God, this is amazing. You have to share this with everybody." And so, one of our intentions is to take these reports and, get them up on Nextdoor, get people looking at them, because it's just a treasure trove of information. And it kind of represents our mission just overall, which is it's got a lot about passive recreation, a lot about the human history, use of the land, that kind of stuff, but also the ecological things. So really anybody interested in enjoying our conservation lands is going to find something in those reports that'll be valuable to them.
This is Tom Trainer. Can I add a point since Neil mentioned my name? The Leland Mill Pond report was very helpful for a grant we're working on through the Energy and Sustainability Committee, a Charles River watershed flood modeling grant that we as one of 15 communities is providing data on all the tributaries going into the Charles. So that being the one dam in Sherborn, it was helpful to have that information that didn't exist anywhere else. Nice report.
Glad you enjoyed it. If anybody on advisory has the time, I highly recommend that you take a look at them. They're actually very pleasant reading. It's not, just nerdy botanical stuff.
Thank you.
All right. Any additional questions or comments from advisory to the Conservation Commission? All right, seeing none, I believe we are done with you guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Next, we were supposed to have select board. We're gonna pass on them. Town forest. Is there anybody here from town forest? I believe you're muted.
Sorry about that. Dave Colleen here.
Yeah.
Um,
You're in the dark and you're listed as Diane. So
I'm sorry about that.
sorry.
Yeah, we have a revolving fund, all of which has come from our own firewood program. And we use that for our maintenance and projects. We actually don't have a budget with you guys. We use this money year after year. So I'm not sure of the projects that we have. Some of them we had a good one going off of North Main Street last year, and we got about half of it done when COVID really took off. So hopefully we're gonna get going on it again in the spring, and a couple of others that we're gonna be doing. We have, if you want to know the projects we have, we've got North Main, we have another plan, couple other plans of areas we're going to be doing, some parking lots, fire road work that needs to be done, and we have some engineering to be done for water problems at North Main Street and the parking lot there. So we'll be using our own money there.
So your revolving fund limit is set at 35,000. If I remember correctly, that went up significantly like two or 3 years ago. And was that for the North Main project that it went up?
Yeah, we got a grant. We used part of the grant that we got back, and then we used our money back and forth. And like I said, we haven't finished that project, so monies will be going to finish that project and other projects that we have.
And do you know, and Sharon, actually, you might know where's the town forest revolving fund at right now? And you are muted, Sharon.
Sorry, I don't have that information right now. I can look it up though.
That's right. And Dave, about how much do you bring in each year from the sale of firewood?
On a good year, it was 7. And of course, last year it was very little because, our group was a little older and they were nervous about COVID. So we kind of shut down. So we're hoping for a big year in the woods this year. My son Sean is going to try to help me with some plans that we're going to be doing on North Main Street and further up off of Hunting and Perry. And we're going to do another state parcel on another section.
And when you say do these projects, do you mean basically clear the forest to collect the firewood?
No, we don't clear it.
I don't mean clear it, but I mean, pick up what's there to.
Yeah, the one on North Main Street, we clear cut the red pines because they were diseased, dying, and they were dangerous. We haven't come up with a full plan for that yet. We may be planning some, like a nursery for town trees in one area and see how the natural growth will come back in. Some of the other areas need to be selective cut. So we bring a logger in and they will pick out which trees are the relevant ones to take right now. And then probably 10 to 15 years later, we go the other. You go hardwood for a while, then we go softwood. It's a science that the state and our forester work on. Fire roads are really bad in Sherborn. We've been very lucky that we haven't had a fire. It's been probably 20 years. But with all the dead trees coming in, it's getting dangerous. So that's one of our projects.
And when you guys do these projects and, you know, go in and selectively take down trees, are you using contractors for that? And that's sort of, you know, money comes in and then money goes out. You're paying contractors to do the work?
Right. The North Main project was, that was money out because of the, you know, what it was. It's very unusual to clear cut an area when you have the problems that we had there. And that's why we have to go in and do some planting later on. Most times you take a percentage of the trees.
I did just check the balance. I'm not sure who asked that question, but currently the balance on our ledger is $30,114. Did you guys hear me?
Yes, thank you, Sharon.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, does anybody from advisory have any more questions for Dave on the town forest revolving fund?
Does all of the work that's done come out of the town forest revolving fund budget, or in the case of, say, the North Main Street project, does some of the town tree money go toward that?
We used the firewood money. It was part of the thing when Bob Ambo started it up. It was his idea, because back then we didn't have any budget. We had no money, and he decided to do two good things. One is firewood for older people, and the other thing is to make some money to maintain the town forest. So, you know, we went to the selectmen years back and to get a revolving fund so that we would have, you know, basically our own money to keep these projects going.
But in situations for like North Main, where you have to take down a bunch of trees because they're diseased, that would still be done with your revolving fund. That wouldn't be done with any other town tree removal money. Is that correct?
I'd love to, but if we can do it on our own, then we can stay out of the budget process. You know, don't go after.
And I think they got a grant for that also.
We got a grant, a part of a grant, yeah.
Yeah. Because that's why I think historically the revolving fund wasn't, you know, 35,000. And I just remember a couple of years ago that it spiked up and we were all like, whoa, what, why do you suddenly need all this money and where's it coming from? And it was a grant to do that project.
Yeah, it took me 7 years to get that project done. I had a lot of, you know, the railroad slowed me up. It took me years to get the bridge put back together over the railroad tracks, and you know, getting somebody to come in to do the job. So I mean, that's why the money's kept going up, and we held off doing other projects until we got that one done, because we didn't know what it was going to cost us.
All right. Anybody else from advisory with any questions about the town forest?
Yeah, so just curious, the firewood is actually not, I always assume that's from the dead trees, but that doesn't sound to be the case. You actually do have a management plan where you cut, you know, select trees every year?
No, that's not, that's a different thing. We haven't cut too many dead trees in the woods right now because I had a lot of trees donated to us that came from from bug damage. You know, the town brought trees, trustees of the reservation brought in a bunch of trees for our group. But the next thing we have to do is we have to go in and clear the forest because we have a lot of dead trees coming down. I mean, if you drive Lake Street just past the pond, that's town forest land. You'll see all the trees that are dying and falling into the woods. And see, I don't know whether we're going to try to get those all out or just let them rot. There's two ideas on that.
Got it. Thank you.
All right. Any more questions about the town forest? All right. Seeing none, I believe we're done with that. Thank you, Dave.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. So that's it for the scheduled budgets, but now we have the two additional items that we added. And I believe recreation kind of came into us first and then the treasurer. So Dave, I guess we can start with you.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. So as I think as you're aware, and Steve, I know you started out by saying we could present for our warrant articles today, which we're not ready to do, but I did want to discuss with you guys the some of the details around our warrant article, and basically ask if you guys had any questions or concerns that we could get out in front of before we present to you in a couple weeks. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay. So the warrant article generally, or I should say, the warrant article is to borrow money to cover some of the costs for a artificial turf field over at Laurel. Our thinking right now, so far, this has been a project that you know, the rec has sort of started and stopped over the years, and for various reasons hasn't gone forward. We actually today we benefit from a number of those projects because we have things like site surveys, and we know generally you know, what's possible over in those fields, and we've been able to leverage some of those past projects to kickstart a project today. We've contracted with a company called Castle Booze. They were involved actually over at DS in terms of trying to put artificial turf in over there. And we've been working with them on a preliminary plan for where we might put the fields, the size of the fields, and the scope of the project. So we've got a rough idea of what the cost would be for that project. And we've got, and Gavin, who's here, who's on the rec committee as well, and I have been working together along with Castle Booze to put together some revenue numbers around those fields. So as you probably know, the majority of rec's revenue comes from field leasing, both to in-town teams and out-of-town teams. And the idea is that a fairly significant amount of that this field would generate a fairly significant amount of revenue to help pay for the warrant that we're talking about. So right now, so I'll stop there and just ask if there's any questions before I go into the details around the costs and what we think we're going to ask in the warrant article. Good so far?
I think we're good so far.
All right. So rough estimates. The idea right now is that we will build two 9v9 full-size soccer fields side by side over at Laurel. The reason why we decided on two, we went back and forth between doing just a single field and a double field, was that we felt like we could, there's certainly a lot of hours in the spring where our youth programs can't get on the natural fields, and a single field wouldn't necessarily give us the capacity that we're looking for. But we also felt like during the summer, having two side-by-side fields, we'd be able to attract things like camps and tournaments, because we'd have somewhat of a unique situation having side-by-side fields where you could have multiple games going on. The total estimated right now, and again, these numbers are very preliminary, so because we're still working on final details, but we're looking at somewhere around $3.5 million to build the 2 fields. Our plan is that we will do a significant amount of private fundraising for that. So we will form a fundraising committee, and my goal is that all but about $1 million of it we will raise privately. And that would mean that we would come back to the town for about a $1 million bond. Now, that would put us at about $110K a year that we would have to cover in terms of the bond payments. And so we've been working on, and actually I should back up and just say, we're going to back into how much money we're going to borrow, right? So if we only think we're going to generate free cash from these fields of 110K, then we can't borrow we can't borrow money that would require debt service of 110K. So depending on what we feel like we can put towards the debt service will constitute the amount of money that we think we were going to borrow for the bond. But right now we feel pretty comfortable that we have probably about 150% of the money we would need to cover the debt service for about $1 million. And essentially that's where we stand right now, is we're trying to continue to put together the numbers to show the number of hours that we think we can rent these fields for, the historical prices that other towns have been getting for similar fields, and essentially, what the revenue versus the operating costs of the fields look like.
So this is 2 new fields, additional fields, or
We would-
not
so we would-
replacing existing ones?
We would take 2 current natural fields and that are the size of the 11v11 synthetic fields. We would just essentially change the surface of existing fields. We're not going to expand the footprint over at Laurel.
I see. Okay. But so then are you anticipating that the revenue you would generate from these fields, is the artificial turf ones, is higher than the revenue that you historically have been generating with the natural?
Yeah, so I looked at a number of different towns. So there's a couple of factors there. The first is the number of hours that we can put somebody on these fields. So we lose a significant amount of hours in the spring in particular, because the fields aren't ready. We're waiting for them to germinate. And so that's a particularly difficult season for us, because we've got soccer, we've got lacrosse, all basically requesting hours that we can't give them because the fields aren't ready. We also, have to be careful even during the season, once the fields have germinated, to not overuse them, because we will lose the grass that we have. So whether it's high rain, which will generate mud, which we lose hours to, all contribute to to us being able to increase the number of hours on the synthetic field. So there's the number of hours that gets increased, and the dollar amount that we would rent the field for as well. So
you would increase the rent.
We would increase the rent. Looking at other towns, they get approximately double for a synthetic field that they would compared to a natural turf field. So if we charge a town team, let's say $35 today to use a field for an hour, we would double that and say, charge them 70 to use the synthetic field, roughly.
And
how would access, if I may, Steve?
No, go ahead, Peter.
Sure, go.
If how would access to this field change? Currently, anyone can go walk their dog, run around, throw a frisbee. With synthetic fields, that won't be able, they won't be able to do that, I would imagine.
So for an individual, nothing would change other than the dog walking part. I mean, we do actually, we don't actually allow people to walk their dogs out on the fields, but people do. We recognize that people do it for the very reason that many times people don't pick up after their dogs, and it affects the kids out there playing. So technically, dog walking, while an activity that happens out there, is not ideal for the playing fields. But we've always maintain that an individual or, you know, a group of friends that want to go out and use any of the fields are welcome for essentially to pick up and have a game or go practice or what have you. It's only when you want to reserve the field that we would charge somebody. So the teams typically want to know that if they show up at 2 o'clock on a Saturday, that's their field. And as long as the fields are not reserved, any citizen, you know, any Sherborn resident or, you know, pretty much anyone can go out on the fields and use them for practice and just recreational use. So it wouldn't change the use of the field from that perspective, other than, like I said, it will be fenced in to prevent people from walking dogs or having dogs be able to go out on the synthetic fields.
Dave, if I might add too, just to be clear, the synthetic turf part of this field is only about 20% or so of the overall footprint of Laurel. So the other 80% stays natural grass.
So if we can just circle back to synthetic fields in general, if I'm just a random team looking for a field and all else being equal, I've got these two choices, a natural one and the artificial one. Which one is generally preferable for, you know, a kids team wanting to play a game?
It depends on the team and it depends on their budget. If you're talking about a club soccer team or a field hockey team, they're going to choose the synthetic field over the natural field almost all the time. If you're talking about a budget conscious team, like let's say youth soccer, where, you know, only for select games might they need the synthetic field, they might choose the natural turf over the synthetic turf strictly because of cost. You know, you don't need your, you know, first graders out on the synthetic field, you know, playing a 5v5 game.
All right.
Oh, I'm sorry, Steve.
No, go ahead, Jane.
Do we have enough of a sense of the market that we feel pretty confident that what we're seeing as true in other towns would be true as well in Sherborn? In other words, first of all, are we sure that you said usually you get double the rent for synthetic. Are we sure that that's because it's synthetic, or is it because, you know, some of these places are, I don't know, right next to a train station and they're really easy to get to? You know what I mean? Like, is it possible that we would not be as attractive as these other places for other reasons?
So the towns that we've looked at actually publish their field leasing fees. And if you look at the cost of the natural turf versus the synthetic turf, it's clear that they're charging a premium for the synthetic turf. I mean, in some cases, it's almost 3 times as much as the natural turf. So I believe the demand is out there. We've talked to the local clubs, you know, youth soccer, youth lacrosse, field hockey. There's been an uptick in field hockey, and they have a very difficult time playing on the natural turf. So we know that there's significant demand in town, and we've talked to clubs outside of Dover Sherborn that have also expressed an interest in using the fields for the hours that they can get on it that our youth teams aren't on it. So I mean, yes, I think the demand is there. Doug, I think Doug McDougall's on as well, right? Maybe.
There is
But
a
he's
Doug.
been,
Yeah, I'm here.
So Doug, you've been talking to a number of towns over the past couple of weeks as well. I don't know if you want to comment on that.
Yeah, I can just comment that I've talked to a lot of the athletic directors and recreation directors in what we call the Tri-Valley League that the high school kids play in. And most of them are using synthetic turf fields, and there is a need for those. Our seasons are getting longer. Wear and tear on the turf fields is taking a toll, and it's very hard to keep that so many practices on our fields. And talking to a lot of different towns, turf fields can make money if they're done right. And David and Gavin and Bo have put together a very good program. And the numbers, we keep on checking them, and they're coming in to what we're comfortable with at this point.
Yeah, so
I know that this has occurred in Sherborn once and in Dover once, where the idea was floated and shot down. What has changed since those previous times? More recently, Dover, they were going to do it on Chickering.
Yeah.
And Laurel Field had come up a number of years ago and nothing came of it. So
yeah, so I wasn't on the commission at that point, so I can speak from what I understand. And, you know, if anyone else has a comment about the, you know, what was the impediment for moving forward with the, you know, with the project the last time in Sherborn. I know that was a much more aggressive project, or, you know, wider in scope than what we're proposing. That project included things like field house and a bubble for, you know, the synthetic fields. It included lights. It included, you know, playgrounds, and, you know, it looked wonderful. But in order to get all of that in there, there was a public-private partnership that was part of the proposal, where the management of the facility was turned over to a third party. And I believe that, my personal opinion is that, you know, as wonderful as a broad project like that is, you know, it's difficult to, you know, to get everyone on board with turning over the management of our town facilities to a third party. So we've intentionally tried to keep this project limited in terms of scope. We're really just changing the, you know, the actual playing surface. We're not adding lights. We're not adding a concession stand. We're not adding, you know, anything other than really just turning, well, I should say one of the things that's in scope here is to improve the parking that's over in Laurel as well. We estimate we have about, you know, 80 or 90 parking spots over there, which isn't sufficient for the field. So as part of the plan, we would just take and extend the parking lot and add about 100 parking spaces over there. But really, by limiting the scope of the fields and saying, you know, look, we're not going to add lights. We're not going to try and bite off more than is necessary to really just improve the playing experience for the, you know, for the town. I would also say that I think that, you know, 8-10 years ago, the sentiment around playing on turf fields was different. In terms of, you know, we see so much interest from club teams now. The club teams are taken off. They want a more consistent, more true playing surface, and that's just increased the demand. You know, in terms of, and now many of our kids, when they're playing outside of our towns, are playing on turf fields. And, you know, this is an opportunity to provide the same level, the same experience in town as they see outside of town. Does that help?
yes, thank you.
Okay, great. And I can't speak for Dover. I know Dover, again, was a fairly ambitious project, but I don't know the details around why that didn't end up, you know, happening.
All right, so then can we then go into a breakdown of your sort of financial analysis of this project? You know, obviously you've come up with what will this whole thing cost and a target for how much you want to raise privately for it. But obviously I think we'll be most interested in your calculation of the revenue that these two fields are going to bring in and how that's going to pay for itself.
Yeah. Do you want me to share a spreadsheet?
Yeah.
You want me to just tell you?
Let's see. Whatever's easier for you.
Okay. Gavin, are you all right if I share this?
Yep, that's fine.
Yeah. So, and again, I would say that we've put a lot of work into this. We believe that these numbers are fairly accurate, but we still want to spend some time with them and make sure that we've got everything right. And before we come in front of you and present, in a couple weeks, we'll continue to challenge as to whether or not these numbers will hold true. But basically, we have taken the 4 seasons, and broken it down by the number of days, both weekdays and weekend days. And so you can see the seasons here and the total number of days we get within the season. And then we've tried to approximate across the different seasons how many hours we think we get of daylight that we can utilize these fields. Because remember, we're not going to put lights on them, so we are limited to the daylight hours. And then just based off of those calculations, which is the number of weekends, we know we can play on them all day. For weekdays, certainly when school's in session, we know that they will not be in demand during those hours. And then that gives us the total number of hours that are available to lease these fields in a given year. And then based off of that, we've tried to include some sort of seasonality demand. So we know, again, we talked about spring. We know that spring is a very popular time. We know that the demand will be very high. Winter obviously would be very low. Fall, we know we're not gonna, it won't be quite as strong as spring, but we know we've got a lot of soccer going on in the fall. And then certainly in the summer, when the field itself gets hot, when kids are at camp and so forth, we've adjusted for seasonality there. And that gives us a total number of hours in season that we think the field will be available. And then again, we've just tried to be conservative and account for things like snow and rain, lightning, what have you, when the fields might not be available. I think, Gavin, you had done some research on the number of days of rain per season, on average within Massachusetts over the past few years, to try and get a sense for what percentage of the total available hours the fields will be unavailable because of weather. And then that gets us a total number of available hours per year, which is this 1,200 number. Now, again, we think we're directionally correct here. It may be higher, maybe lower, but we think that's about right in terms of the number of hours. Beyond that, we spent some time looking at what other towns charge for like fields and what we think we can charge both in-town teams and out-of-town teams. So we think about 25% of these total available hours will come from in-town, and they're going to get charged a significantly lower rate than out-of-town teams. So that would be men's leagues and clubs, and again, that's lacrosse and field hockey and soccer and so forth that are out of town. So we've come up with, and I won't get into the details today, unless I'm happy to answer the questions if you have them, but we've done some analysis to try and come up with a blended cost per hour of the fields, given that we think 25% is going to come from in town and 75% is going to come from out of town. And that gives us these revenue numbers here, which adds up to about 150,000 in revenue per field per year. And that brings it, across 2 fields gets us to about 300,000 a year. Now these fields they do have about a 10-year lifespan. So one of the most significant things that we have to include in this 300,000 is the field replacement fee that we're going to get in about 10 years. And that field replacement fee is about 1.2 million, about half the cost of building the field initially. So we have calculated what are our operating costs per year. So we've got the field replacement fee, any upgrade, maintenance issues around the fencing and the netting and so forth. And just, again, being very conservative with our operating costs. We think we have to put aside about 145,000 of that 300,000 just for the operating costs and the field replacement fee. That leaves us about 170,000 to service any debt that we would take on with the field. And we calculated that if we borrowed $1 million, our debt service would be around 110,000. So my projection was to try and get to our revenue being about at least 150% of our debt service. And that kind of gives you a sense for the numbers that sit behind this. I know I spoke a lot, but so I'll stop now and see if there's any questions.
The turf replacement, so you're saying it would be 1.2 million approx in about 10 years to replace both of them.
Correct.
And so you're setting aside 120,000 per year over the next 10 years. Is that money actually being set aside in a separate fund? Or are you just saying that 10 years from now, we're going to need another 1.2 million?
No. So it would be set aside. Now, the actual specifics of whether or not we create another fund that the money goes into, and I don't know if it would just sit there, if it would get invested into something. I'd have to talk to Sharon about the logistics around that. But the idea is it would go into, whether it's sitting in our revolving fund, sitting in a separate fund, it would accumulate over the 10 years to get to 1.2 million, giving us the money to come back and replace the fields. So we would not have to borrow money in 10 years to replace the fields.
And then your demand adjustment, your 55%, 80%, 15, 90, were those numbers sort of based on the seasonal demand of the existing fields?
Yeah,
go
they
ahead.
are originally proposed by Castle Booze, which is the organization that's working with us on the master plan. And we tweak them a little bit based off what we have seen. Some of it's projection, right? Because we know right now in the spring, we don't utilize the fields as much as we could because of issues around making sure that they're that we maintain the quality of the fields over time. So some of it is just educated analysis of what we think the demand is, based not only on our actual numbers but on what we think we can get with synthetic.
Right. Do you have sort of somewhere else a kind of worst case scenario for the demand in terms of, I would assume that at minimum, the demand for these fields is going to be the same or higher than for the existing turf fields, right? But in a worst case scenario type calculation, what would be the minimum that you might expect to actually generate per year? Obviously, your target is 150, or I guess 313 for the pair of them.
Yeah.
But do you have an idea of, okay, well, at minimum, we're probably going to make at least this much?
Yeah, so that's probably analysis that we have to do, is to sit there and say, what if the floor fell out and we didn't get anywhere near what we expected to? The good news is the 313 is more than enough to cover our debt service.
Right.
What would end up happening is we wouldn't be putting enough away for the new field.
Right.
And so we would have a deficit in 10 years. The good news is we'd have the original fields paid off. We'd have that bond paid off in 10 years. And we'd have some deficit between what we were able to collect for the new field and what the actual cost was. So given the old bond is coming off the books, potentially we could get a new bond to cover the delta between what we've actually been able to save and what we need.
Right.
And the reality is that some of these fields are lasting 12, 15 years.
Mm-hmm.
But again, in talking to Castle Booze, they said, just be conservative and assume it's only gonna have a lifespan of 10 years.
And then how much annually are the two fields generating currently in, let's say, non-COVID years?
Yeah, I have that number. Just those two fields?
Just those two fields, yeah. Because what I'd like to see is, okay, how much more are these two synthetic fields expecting to generate over the existing ones? Because realistically, I feel like that's where you're paying off your debt service, right? Because presumably the revenue that those fields are currently generating, you're using that revenue to then pay for other aspects of your service, right?
Yeah, I don't have that number handy, and again, it's a hard comparison because we really don't have two 11v11 fields there right now. We break them up into 9v9 and 7v7, and really most of the all of the 11v11 right now is happening over at Fessenden, but Fessenden unfortunately gets extremely wet, and we can't use it, till late spring, early summer at times. So while we've got people asking for reservations, we've had to turn them away. So we could probably come up with something that approximated, what we think those fields are generating today, but I don't think it wouldn't be a great comparison. I mean, it would help a little bit, but I don't know that it would truly tell us, what are those fields generating today versus, what's the uplift for the two synthetic fields.
Yeah.
I'll try and put that together though. Again, when we come and present formally, I'll try and get the numbers for what do we think is the low mark, which was the first question you asked. Like, what if we have a really bad year? What can we expect that number to be? As well as what do we think we're getting from those fields today, and what's the delta or what's the uplift
Right.
for them being synthetic?
Right. Because that's when I look at this, I mean, to me, those are the keys, right? Because you make a projection of, oh, we're going to bring in all this much money. And it's like, okay, well, how accurate is that, right? And what is the worst case scenario on that? And then the other part is, okay, well, we're replacing some existing field with these two that's going to generate a whole bunch of money and pay for themselves. And they say, okay, well, yes, the gross revenue will pay for itself, right? But in terms of the net, you want to make sure, because now you're laying out an extra $110,000 each year that you weren't before, right? And so we want that to then start negatively affecting your revolving fund, right? If you were depending on that for the other operations that your revolving fund is paying for.
Yeah, good question. And Doug, I mean, again, I'll ask Doug. He's the one who's been talking to the athletic directors, and he probably has anecdotal, sort of evidence in terms of the demand that they're seeing across the fields. But from I won't speak for him. I will, I guess, for a second, and I'll turn it over to him. But the demand that other towns are seeing is strong and far exceeds, their capacity to service it.
Okay.
Doug, I don't know if you want to chime in, if you're still there. Maybe he's on mute. He just got bored. He got bored with me, so he's watching television or something.
He is unmuted, but
no, he's on mute.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
That's all right. But we can talk to that as well, just as, the conversations we've been having with other towns in terms of the demand that they're seeing for their fields.
Yeah. I like the idea that you are building in, a sort of savings account to replace it in 10 years. I guess a question that I would have, and this is probably more a question for the remainder of advisory and maybe even Heidi Doyle, the treasurer, is does it make sense fiscally to do that, to set money aside to pay for it, the replacement, or does it make more sense to just assume you're going to bond another 1.2 million in 10 years, right, and amortize that over the next 10 years, and meanwhile use the $120,000 that you're setting aside to actually continue to fund and or improve other aspects of your operations that you pay for?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I don't know, I mean, I have to talk to Heidi about it, but we didn't get into the specifics about, what do you do with that money? Do you want to just have it sitting in an account? I mean, our goal obviously is that there's other free cash that comes out of this 313. So if we can get another 20K, 30K per year, that's money that can go into our revolving fund that, we know we need to replace the fences over at the tennis courts. We know we need to resurface the tennis courts at some point. So some of those capital projects, our hope is that we will have enough money left over to do those as well. Now, obviously, if you take this 120K, then you say, look, your better strategy is to spend that each year on the capital projects that you have. And not just have it sitting in an account. I think, yeah, that's something we'd be happy to explore.
Steve, I can answer that question. Sustainability is preferred over perpetual indebtedness. So.
Yeah, Steve?
Yeah.
It could be, how they have an elder housing stabilization fund that was created?
Yes. Yeah.
I was thinking you could have a park and rec capital stabilization fund, which could be then used for any project they brought up, that the money would be earmarked just for park and rec for their capital expenses.
Sure.
So should another project come up and you need some at 120, you can use it, but if you add more to it, whatever, let it build up that way.
Sure. And can money that's in a stabilization fund, can that be invested, or does that just have to sit there?
No, that's in one of my trusts. Like I have trust funds and I have, the cemetery, the elder housing stabilization fund. It is invested. You do have limited investment opportunities, just like all the other municipal trust funds.
And you're getting what, like 0.5% to 1%, something like that?
A little more. Hopefully,
Okay.
it's based on earnings. I mean, there is something and it does better than others, but it's usually a little better than like your money markets and things like that now.
See, so I didn't have to have a separate conversation with you, Heidi. We can answer.
Yeah, no, I was like, well, Heidi's already here, so
right.
I'm sure she has something that she can say that's smart. All right. Anybody else from advisory have any questions or comments?
Well, I would just have the comment that for me personally, I think I'd be interested in seeing more information about the overall value proposition for the town. And by that, I mean, these fields are going to be useful to town residents who, have families who participate in soccer. And that's a subset of citizens. Now, that's true for everything we spend money on, or almost everything we spend money on in town. But I think I heard you say that 75% of the hours would be taken by non-resident groups. So we'd be asking the town to fund this to the tune of $1 million or so, but only 25% of the time would our own residents be taking advantage of it, if I understood you correctly. So that's just sort of one thing that I question. I would just like to understand better the value proposition there. And then the flip side of that, I guess, is if there is a significant amount of extra money that is coming in, how would that be spent? I mean, we've had some discussion just now about would it go into a capital fund, but how in what ways might that benefit the town at large, such that someone who doesn't, participate and have a family that participates in soccer could say, well, maybe this is a good thing for me because even though my family doesn't participate in soccer, I don't know, something else is going to happen in town that my family would take it.
Yeah, great question. So the 25%, first of all, the 25% in terms of in town is based off of current demand. So we know how many hours they use every year. And, it's about 400 hours. And unless we see a significant increase in the number of sports or the number of kids in town, there's only so much need that they have for fields. So it's not that we're trying to limit the town sports. It's just that there's only so much demand that comes from those town sports. So that gives us excess capacity, right, that we can go and utilize. With regard to how it helps the other citizens, yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have a large number of projects. Well, I shouldn't say large. We've got a number of projects within rec that we've been talking about for years. Again, I mentioned the tennis courts. If you've been over there, the fencing is all like, curled at the bottom. And if you're playing pickleball or what have you, the balls are rolling out onto the streets. That's a significant project that, generally rec has tried to just do from within its own revolving fund. So we can accelerate some of those projects. We need new dugouts over on the baseball fields. We talk about pickleball. The demand for pickleball, it just keeps rising and rising and rising. And, we're very aware of the fact that we still have a large number of tennis players within the town, and we don't want to create conflict where, the pickleball players have taken over the tennis courts. And so, one of the ideas was like, hey, should we have dedicated pickleball courts, right? So all of a sudden, all of these funds now allow us to go and explore some of these projects sooner than we normally would have had to, because we would have had to wait, either go and ask for the money from the town, via a bond or, just a warrant article, or we would have had to wait a longer period of time in order to explore them. So, I mean, yeah, the scope of how we can help the rest of Sherborn, the rest of the citizens is mainly within the Park and Rec scope. But there are a number of things outside of just soccer that we think, we could do.
Do you guys have any overlap with Sherborn Forest and Trails Association? Like, is there any way that the money within this revolving fund could be put towards, trails in the town forest and such?
Not to date, we haven't. But that's not to say that we couldn't explore something like that down the road. I mean, I'm not foolish enough to think that if we start generating a significant amount of cash, that there aren't other committees that will come to us and say, hey, can you help out with this, or can you help out with that? And it generally falls within things that would be considered, recreational. And we've already done that. We did that 2 years ago with the docks over at Farm Pond, which was, we paid for a quarter of them. So I don't have any problem with, considering how can we use these funds outside of just the land that we manage, to say, how do we better just the recreation for the town in general.
All right.
So I realize that this isn't our formal presentation around the warrant article.
Yeah.
We have gone into a significant amount of detail, but I did want to make sure that we didn't come to you with a presentation where there were lots of questions around, hey, can you tell me this? Can you tell me that? Why is this way? I wanted to head off any of those questions or concerns now, so that when we come and present in a couple of weeks, we've considered those things and, and address them.
Yeah, well, we appreciate it. I think.
Can I ask just one more question, Steve?
Yep.
And it's kind of the elephant in the room, right? So what you've said, a lot of private fundraising would take place. Is there reason to believe that this could not be 100% privately funded?
Actually, my goal would be it's 100% privately funded, and we don't actually end up using the $1 million at all. However, should we fall short of our fundraising goals, or this allows us to go and and complete the project with the money from the bond. But it's hard to know without actually having started the fundraising what kind of commitments we're going to get. We know that the library was able to raise a significant amount of money in a very short period of time. Maybe we are able to do it 100% just from fundraising.
And you guys aren't building a building.
No.
So what you would be coming to at town meeting is essentially authorization to borrow up to $1 million.
Correct.
Okay. And do you have a timeline in terms of like when you would expect that you would know how much you need to borrow, and then when the project would begin and end?
Yeah, so I had talked, when I talked to Heidi, she had said it's beneficial to put a time limit on the bond. So something like 2 years, to say, look, we'll earmark the $1 million for you, or whatever it is. It could be 800K, it could be 1.2, but it's all going to come down to what we can. We're not going to borrow any more than we can service from a debt perspective, right? But we earmark the money, and then we have to go and complete the fundraising, and we would have a window with which we have to complete the fundraising and use the funds. And I think that the number she threw out was 2 years.
Great.
And Steve, that's not something that's set in stone. It's just, it would, I think, be much more palatable for the town to know that the project wouldn't start till the fundraising was kind of committed and some better handle, that we would not be on the hook for more than $1 million.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's probably going to be the biggest question, which is, given the events of the past, how do we ensure that the fundraising is there and that the town's not responsible for more than the $1 million? And likewise, I mean, I think that, the fact that we've got a clear path to the revenue to cover the bond anyway, right? So hopefully after a presentation to the, at town meeting, people would see that there's no way the town's there shouldn't be any way the town should be on the hook for the bond, right? REC's generating the revenue, REC should be able to pay it off.
But there is opportunity cost, right? I mean, that's money that didn't get spent on something else the town might. So, I mean, I think it's not just, are we going to lose out on the deal, but, but opportunity cost as well. I mean, I just think that has to be taken into consideration.
Meaning that the town, that by authorizing the $1 million to REC, something else isn't getting authorized?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I don't know enough about whether or not it's an either or whether it's an and. So yeah, if that's the case, if our borrowing means that borrowing doesn't happen somewhere else, then potentially you're right. If you say like, hey, look, we're not going to do these improvements at Farm Pond because REC's trying, REC, we're going to borrow the money for REC, then yeah, absolutely. You have to, there's an opportunity cost because you didn't do something else. But if it's no, we can do both, then yeah, then potentially there isn't a trade-off.
Yeah, plus, I think what Dave was suggesting is more of a Woodhaven model on the borrowing, where Woodhaven had the town take out borrowing money for the units that were going to be rehabbed, and they've actually built that in and pay that back to the town, so they're covering their debt service. Where a lot of other projects in town, it's the town's borrowing, and we're taking on the full liability.
Yeah, I mean, I think certainly that's what makes this more palatable, is that there is at least an estimated revenue stream,
right,
or an increased revenue stream coming in from this project, right? And so to me, those become the key questions, right? Is how accurate or how reliable is that revenue stream, and how increased is it over the existing revenue stream? So I think those would be the key things that I would want to see in your sort of formal presentation to us.
Yep. Yeah, we'll work on that.
Well, anything else?
No, I mean, I think I've actually gone into more detail than I was expecting to. So they were all good questions. So I appreciate that. And if anyone can think of anything that you forgot or you want us to cover when we formally present, feel free to reach out to me and just say, oh, I was thinking about this after you got off the meeting. You know, what about this? I'm happy to address those things because, you know, obviously we've put a lot of time into this. We want to do whatever we can to help it succeed. And so, you know, the more we can, you know, we can answer any questions you have, you know, we're happy to.
All right.
Cool.
May I ask a couple of questions, please?
Yeah.
You said right now 11v11 only can happen at what field? President or something?
Yeah, President. Yeah.
Where is that?
That's on Western Ave, near the, what is it? What's the farm?
Oh, so this is a Sherborn field, you mean?
Yes, a Sherborn.
Okay, okay, got it. And so this Laurel field is closer to Natick. So is that where you're expecting most of the outside of town revenue to come? Maybe Natick, maybe Framingham, or no, even farther?
It depends on where the club teams. I mean, really, what ends up happening is that you've got private teams that, you know, there might be Sherborn kids on it. There could be Dover kids. It could be Wellesley kids. It could be wherever. So wherever those club teams happen to have a team, you might have a club lacrosse team that is Metro West, and those kids could be coming from all over Metro West to Laurel. So they may be headquartered in Natick, or they may be headquartered in Wayland or what have you, but that doesn't necessarily, that's just where their post office box is. Their kids are probably, you know, could be coming from, you know, from the general area.
Okay, got it. So it's not necessarily that our market is just the neighboring town that are within 5-10 minute drive from the field.
Yeah, and I mean, just as a, you know, again, anecdotally, my son plays club baseball, and they draw kids from all over the area to Medfield. They'll drive 45 minutes to play on that team. So it just depends on, you know, the team that the kids want to play for, which one they make, you know, how far those parents are willing to drive. So there's a lot of factors in terms of how far the kids will travel to, you know, to a facility.
Yeah. Now, this is probably because of my ignorance. I just can't understand like 3.5 million for turf, but you know, since the field is already flat and all you're doing is just replacing that top layer, but wow. Is it really 3.5 million just for the turf? What else is involved? Like the field is already flat, right? You're saying you're replacing an already existing natural field with turf. So this is just the cost of laying down the material, making sure it's flat and all of that?
So it's that's about half of it is the synthetic field itself. So you've got a significant amount of cost, which is just to clear it. So remove any trees, take away topsoil, you know, whatever else needs to be done just to prep the area. You've got to then put down an underlayment that needs to be compacted, and then you've got sort of a rubber, you know, membrane that goes down, and then you've got the turf field, the turf itself that goes on top, and then you've got the infill. I don't know if you've ever played on a turf field before, but you've got an infill. Sometimes it's little rubber pellets. Sometimes it's, you know, some sort of organic matter, but it provides a little more cushion as you're running across it. And so, you know, all of that together is, you know, like I said, is about 2 million of it. You've got things like fencing. We've got to worry about drainage. There's don't forget there's some parking improvements that are included as part of that project. There will be a small storage shed that we'll use for storing goals and equipment and things like that. So yeah, you've got project management fees. You've got included in that is contingency. So we recognize that there's a chance that there's cost overruns. So we've got to account for that. You know, it will go out to bid. So again, we don't know the actual cost until we get the bids in, but that based off of what Castle Booze is telling us, that's what they're thinking the cost will be.
Okay,
Are there
thank you.
any environmental concerns with, you know, replacing dirt and grass with plastic and rubber?
Yeah, we did go to Concom, gosh, Gavin, pre-COVID, I think a year and a half ago,
A year and a half ago.
just to let them know that this was something we were considering. And we asked if there was anything that, any major concerns that they saw with doing this. There wasn't anything, other than, how is it going to drain and what's it made out of? And, some of the high level questions, there wasn't anything that they saw as a major concern over there, given that they're already playing surfaces today. So I think the biggest question is probably drainage and materials, and we'll have to go back to them and present to them with what we're planning on doing. But that's part of the project is to consider drainage, and we'll have a choice of materials, different costs for different materials, but some are synthetic, some are organic. We'll be able to make a choice.
And are you gonna run it by Board of Health also? Because I would imagine things leaching into the groundwater might be a concern as well.
Now that you say that, yes. Yeah, I mean, I've been asking like, who should we run this by? But Board of Health is a good one as well, to make sure that we're not running afoul of anything.
Yeah. All right. Any other questions from advisory? And remember that they'll be coming back to us in a couple of weeks with another presentation. So don't have to get all your questions in now. All right. Well,
Cool.
I think we're all set with you guys for now. We appreciate you coming to us for a preliminary discussion. So there's no surprises later, hopefully.
Yeah, no, we appreciate your time as well. So thanks a lot.
Sure.
Thanks for all the good questions.
All right. And then lastly, I believe you had another issue that you wanted to talk to us about.
Yes, and I know it's late and everyone's tired, so I'll try and keep it brief here. I think what I'm kind of coming is to advisory to ask you for some help with my budget and what's going on, some of the situations. About 2015, the town made some organizational changes, and they moved two of the workers that had previously been splitting time between the accountant and the treasurer's office over to the accountant and created a finance director accountant. And that became a 40-hour finance director with 70 hours of those two people that did those jobs. So the jobs moved with them and the people moved with them, and the treasurer department had changed. And then over the last couple of years, I've been working with you trying to get my department to a point where I was getting compensated for the hours I was paid, and I got an assistant that was 10 hours that can do the job and be someone to stand in, and actually, if I take a vacation, can actually fund the money, do the work, which I felt was a good solution, and it's where I'm comfortable being. This fall, I was told that since I got an increase in hours, I could now take back some of these functions that the treasurer used to do that they felt were best practices for the office. But I never got any other support or anything else that came with it, just the added duties were coming back. And I was told that these shouldn't be very much. They'd only take like an hour, hour and a half. I did not want to take this on. I just did not feel it was in the department's capabilities right now. And I think they should be looked into, because there was no offset from the accounting side for these savings that they were getting, that were now the duties were shifting back to the treasurer side. So I kind of feel this is something that should come through advisory, because part of your bylaws has that you can do investigations into the management of departments. And I think it should be a better overview. Maybe there are other functions that should shift and change. And this might be the time to look at it if people think there needs to be changes. And as far as the best practices go, I don't understand where that came from, because the treasurer collector's manual that seems to be the source for best practices, and I wasn't consulted on this, so I wasn't involved in any of the discussion, says right in it that under the vendor payments, which is the function they're trying to put onto the treasurer's office, is that generally the treasurer's office prepares the checks to be signed and issued. In some communities, however, the accountant or auditor prepares the checks, utilizing computer system to print the checks at the same time at the warrant. So it's both offices can do it. It's best, seems to be best practices. It's in print in the manual. I was reluctant to do this. I did start doing it this last week, and it took 3.5 hours, not 1 to 1.5 hours. My assistant cannot work past 10 hours for personal reasons, that she has obligations. She had to leave. I got stuck with trying to seal 180 envelopes. Jackie, the town clerk, came over to help me finish the job to get that done. And we're just like, this is not good fiscal management, having higher paid people now doing this type of work. I don't feel this is the right way to handle a department shifting duties to a department without a discussion and without looking into if this is really in the benefit of the town, and especially when that there should have been a savings on the other side, a reduction in one side if you're shifting it over to another side. So I'm going to ask advisory at, if this is going to be the case, it's not going to work for the treasurer's office without support coming back with these duties. And I'd like you to look into it if possible.
Heidi, what's the actual task?
The tasks are currently the assistant accountant has been putting the warrant together. Well, now they have each department head enters their own invoices into Vadar, which before the assistant accountant used to enter the invoices, check them, and then do it. Now she doesn't enter them anymore. She just checks them. And it was having to then match the checks that came with invoices. We got a stack of invoices that have to match to checks, and then stuffing them into the envelopes, sealing the envelopes, getting them to the mail, into the post office. They also want us to then get into where we start printing the checks as well, and taking over the whole procedure for that, which it's fine, but it's the 10 hours I have allotted that someone's already using. This has taken a significant time. And when we tried it, we had remittances, 3 slips there that we didn't have any checks for, and we had no clue what they were to do. And they said, oh, well, Ready Fresh is Nestle. Well, we don't know what different names that people go by. It's like, we don't know the vendors. We don't know what they're doing. And it's been working well for 3.5 years. And I just don't know why the sudden push, especially during COVID time when people aren't in the offices, to make a change like this, where you're now doing a new procedure. We didn't know how to use the stamp machine to try and seal it. And that's why Jackie, the town clerk, came over to help me to show me how to seal envelopes, which you have to manually put in one each time. It's just different functions that haven't been part of my office since I've been here for 3.5 years. And it's a lot. It takes a chunk of time when I'm 30 hours and I have a 10-hour assistant.
Right. So I guess, Sharon, can you give some background? I know you've been here 3.5, 4 years or so. So this may even predate you. What are we trying to go back to, or?
All right, so it's basically, it takes 1.5 to 2 hours every other week. Stuffing
No.
100. Well, it's a learning curve, Heidi. And first of all,
Sharon, it's not. You have not physically done this.
Heidi, let
of course I haven't done it.
Let Sharon share her side of things.
This is an administrative task. This is not something that the treasurer and the town clerk should be doing. And you're correct. I have never done it, and nor will I. We transferred this to you. And what's going to happen when we completely convert over to Vadar? Let me tell you, there's not going to be much work for your admin assistant to do, because right now it's double data entry. And once we convert to Vadar, all the data entry is going to be done in Vadar by Pam, and we're not going to have these separate bank accounts and all this craziness and double data entry. So this is a short period of time. But quite honestly, my assistant town accountant, her time is definitely better spent doing analysis and assisting with all the intense finance work that's going on and growing than stuffing envelopes every other week.
So it's basically the accounts payable function. Yeah. You're paying in warrants, invoices.
Yeah, well, the thing is, let me just, Peter, what happens is, so right now we run the checks, and what we do is we give them to Heidi, and she needs to stamp them. So it was crazy. So she would stamp them, and then she'd give them back to us to stuff them in an envelope. Well, I'm sorry, a town accountant shouldn't be stuffing envelopes, and nor should Heidi.
And it's, so it's the stamp is as treasurer, she signs the checks. Okay, I get you. I get you. Now, you touched upon where I was going to go was the VADAR efficiencies. And could you tell us more about the VADAR efficiencies? And then Heidi, you can share your view of the VADAR efficiencies.
So right now, what's happening is that all of the collections for taxes, excise, personal property, that is all being maintained in point. And so what's happening is all the data entry is going into point, and then they're giving us turnover. So we're double data entering it to get into VADAR, because initially they did not want, the collector's office did not want to move to VADAR. So now that it's been determined that we're going to do it, and we are moving forward effective for July 1, that whole double data entry is going to go away. And it's going to be very streamlined, and everything's going to be integrated and on one system. So that's what we're looking forward to.
And so Point is the PC-based collection software that's been around since electricity. And that's going to be replaced by VADAR. So but that's in the collector's office. So the treasurer is not going to see any benefit of.
Oh, yes, because what's happening is the data entry, everything that was done in Point would come to the treasurer's office and get data entered into VADAR. That's not going to have to happen anymore, because the collector is going to be using VADAR. So that's going to be the single point of entry.
Oh, so Heidi, now do you take from the collector their list and put it into VADAR?
I
At a
take
higher
from
level,
the
yes.
collector, but I also take
Okay.
from all the other departments. The collector's only one piece of this.
The biggest
So,
piece.
and
Without
Okay.
a doubt, the biggest piece.
well, actually, not really when I look at the number of entries I do, but I don't think it just, this is a decision. I haven't been involved. This is the first I'm hearing from Sharon saying July 1st is going to happen. And I just feel that, especially during COVID, this is not the way to make changes in a department. I agree that I shouldn't be stuffing, and it should be it should be a clerk hired to do stuff in the envelopes.
Heidi, how can you say that this is the first you've heard of it? We just had a meeting with VADAR, with the consultant who's going to be working with us on this whole integration. It was you, it was Pam, it was Wendy, it was me. But were you not there?
This is the first I've heard of that. It's going to impact the treasurer's office, making my job easier. I've not have seen this, and that's the first. I don't think that's the talk. So you know what? I think if
That's
you wanna,
the whole impetus. That's
okay.
why we're doing this.
All right, this is not for advisory. We can get into that. My
Well,
concern with
well,
advisory.
I'm glad we're able to facilitate this bi-directional communication for the benefits and efficiencies of VADAR. Because again, I'm always going to come back to where is the cost savings? And you may not see it initially because you have to run fault tolerant systems in duplicate at first, like Point, which we've always heard, they're going to keep it, but eventually that's going to go away, and those efficiencies will be recognized. And so I'm glad we could help.
No, but I guess for right now, I'm stuck with, I'm losing, it took 3.5 hours. I can't see it cutting down. We might get an hour faster. It's going to take 2.5 hours, and we're not even printing the checks. It takes a long time for people who don't know the vendors. We didn't know the names that these vendors were going in, or to look on how to match up the checks when they've got different names. I didn't know Ready Fresh was Nestle, and that, this other company was Dow. It was at Barron's was Dow. I didn't know that, and I wouldn't know that. I don't deal with vendors. I think if we can get a clerk, but then if it's got to come to the treasurer, then I'm going to need some type of clerk hours added in, or keep it as it is. And Sharon gets more assistance for a clerk to do this if she's going to be utilizing the different. I felt frustrated that I finally got to the point where I feel my office was getting to the point where we could see light at the end of the tunnel. I'm finally getting the hours covered that I'm working. And then this came, and it really was, not a good way to go, especially during COVID where you don't have other people in the office to help.
I've always been taught never to get comfortable because something's going to change. So get comfortable being uncomfortable, because the moment you're comfortable, something's wrong. That's aside. But I think between everyone who's been doing it, my humble opinion, doing the tasks, either piecing it together with SneakerNet, going from point and handing off a summarized version to re-enter, the work has been getting done in some form or fashion. And as we transition to these dual systems, sunsetting one and then ramping up on Vadar, it's going to be learning curves for everyone. And so I just think you all have to work together to maximize the efficiencies, which aren't going to be there at first.
Right.
Just because of the nature of learning and transitioning.
What, can I ask a question? Is it fair to say that there are two separate considerations going on here? One being, what will the universe look like after July 1st, and what efficiencies will be achieved, and what's the best way to split up the work then? And that's a situation that I think is still a future. It's still in the future, and so it's still in the future. And then I think I heard you say, but I may have misunderstood, Heidi, that that these functions were previously done in the treasurer's office, and then hours and functions were moved to the finance director's office.
Correct.
And now the hours are still in the finance director's office, but the functions are moving back to treasurer?
Yes, and that's where I'm having a difficulty with that. The functions got moved, but the hours stayed.
Because I don't know, this is just my own personal opinion, but I don't feel like I'm qualified to opine as to, who's the best person, from a skill set point of view or whatever it is, to do a task. But what does seem fairly, I would say, to me, it's kind of a no-brainer that whoever is doing the task should be the one who has the hours to pay the people to do that task. So,
well, yeah.
So that's what I'm trying, so I would think that for as long as the task exists and it hasn't yet been improved from an efficiency point of view, and somebody still has to do it because we haven't gotten beyond it or we haven't improved on the efficiency of it, then I would think wherever it is, whether it's your office or the finance director's office, that the hours should be with the place where the function is.
I think that's what I'm asking, that the hours follow the task. And it did not happen. It's like the tasks came over, the hours didn't. There was no reduction on the accounting side to say that, oh, we're not doing that anymore, so we can save an hour and a half, 2 hours a week on our side. It's just, maybe we will get that in July, but I'd rather wait till July and say, oh, am I really getting that savings that Vadar is going to give me? Then great, we can then take it on. But right now, it's being done. It's been done for 3.5 years with no impact, no change on the budgets, and no suggestion from accounting that they needed it differently. I just don't understand why it got shifted back in 2015 one direction with the people, and now things are coming back, but without the people.
I guess I feel like some of this is something for maybe the town administrator to handle, but
Actually, David is involved in this, and he definitely supports the decision that we made. And we actually reached out to our auditors to get their guidance. So this is,
and that's right. But that's where I said I got a letter saying, well, the best practices, but no one included me on that discussion. I would have shown that what they're saying, I've been told the best practice in the manual says right in, it can go either one. So I was never involved in that decision. And depends on what you ask is the answer you get. You see, if you say, oh, is it just the treasurer? Oh, yeah, that's fine. Well, if they said, well, could the treasurer or the accountant based on this, it might be a different answer. I would have liked to have seen where I feel advisory has it in your bylaws that you could look into the management departments, that this is addressed to say, well, if you're moving duties back that you previously shifted in 2015 over, but you moved people before, why wouldn't you move people back too, or time that would help with people to get this done? So that's why I kind of feel like I was not included. This has been a decision that's come down. David's been kind of hands off, and he said, oh, as an elected official, you don't really have to do anything. I want to kind of keep out of it. And I was like, I don't want to, get involved, but I do feel advisory could look into if it's a better management position of different departments. And if not, I'd like to wait till July and see if there really is savings in Vadar that, oh, I'm not doing duplicate entries anymore for people. I do have more time in my department and my assistant does have time free. Then yes, that would be a different scenario. But right now her time is used up and she cannot stay past her 10 hours. So that means it falls on me.
I mean, certainly I can talk to David. I can certainly talk to David Williams about it, but I mean, Sharon, how do you feel about the idea of waiting until the Vadar transfer or everything happens on July 1st? Because I mean, it does seem like the argument is there's a task with hours associated that got shifted from your department to Heidi's. And then the argument is that, well, Vadar is going to make things more efficient, so it's going to free up hours. Yet the change seems to happen before the Vadar switch has happened. So I guess to me as an outside observer, that seems logical, but
Well, we actually wanted to do this back in September and we delayed it. So, and now here we are, and it's February, we're delaying it again. And no, I don't want that task back. I do not want my assistant accountant stuffing envelopes. I'm sorry, it's not a good use of her time. And let me tell you, I'm putting in
What's illogical
way
about
more
what
than
Steve is
40 hours a
proposing?
week. Excuse me?
What's illogical about what Steve is proposing?
You're proposing that we wait?
well, because I mean, essentially,
I can't wait. Guess how many hours a week I put in? No, it's not going to happen.
Well, then I'm stuck asking if I could get some extra help in my budget for a clerk.
I thought you said you couldn't do it.
What was the reason to want to change it back in September?
Because it's not cost effective to have a skilled accountant stuffing envelopes when there is so much work to be done.
It's also not cost effective from what I'm hearing to have the treasurer do it. Maybe it is in July because her assistant will free up. But
Well,
until then, I think we still have the same
okay.
issue, right?
No,
It's
it's
someone
not.
overqualified that's performing the task.
No, it's not for the treasurer to do. It's for her assistant.
Can't hear you.
It's for her admin to perform. It's not for Heidi to perform.
but
I
think
have only a 10-hour.
Brett, I think that's the problem right now, Sharon, is that the
Well,
hours aren't
problem is-
allocated.
Sorry, I can't handle it. There's just no way. There's way too much going on in my department, and I'm not going to be doing stuffing checks. Not going to happen.
So Sharon, you were doing it. This is Natalie. You were doing it, but now you decided you're not doing it. And you're an
Exactly.
assistant and your assistant's not doing it. So Heidi's going to do it. Is that what I just heard?
I don't have an assistant. I have a town accountant that works for me.
Yeah.
She's a professional.
Okay.
In my whole entire career, I've never had to stuff an envelope.
But
Sorry.
but it was in your department a minute ago, right? I mean, it was before you, Heidi got it right now, but it was in your department.
I honestly cannot believe that we're having this discussion with the advisory committee about stuffing checks 2 hours a week, every other week. I mean, this is really a waste of time.
No, but your group did it before, right? Your department did it before?
Yeah.
You, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so you did it before, but now it's 2 hours a week. You did it before, but now you can't do it anymore, right?
Right. We are just up to our eyeballs.
So 2 hours a week, you're shifting to Heidi. Is that what I heard?
No, I'm shifting it to Heidi's assistant. And it's 2 hours, not a week. It's 1.5 to 2 hours every other week, stuffing envelopes.
But it used to be
really not that complicated.
Okay.
This is really blown out of proportion.
But it was in your department, and now that 1.5 hours every other week, Heidi should do it now, right?
Heidi's assistant. Yes.
Okay.
But at the moment, Heidi's assistant doesn't have the capacity to do it, and maybe she will in July, right?
Or maybe, or perhaps Heidi's blowing this out of proportion as she usually does. So I don't buy that at all. And I'm
You're
not
the
taking
one
it back.
that said it was an hour and a half every other week and you couldn't do it. You're the one that said that.
Right. I cannot handle it. I'm sorry. You want to talk about hours, Heidi, that I put in? I'm not going down that road.
I think we need to boot this back to David Williams. This is not an advisory.
Yeah, this is not.
You want to propose a new budget with new hours?
This is actually an insubordinate behavior of Heidi coming behind my back, and I just can't even believe this. I can't even believe this. I think I need to bring this as a personnel issue, quite honestly. I've never been treated like this before. This is disgraceful, and I'm
All right.
embarrassed.
Well, I think we can end this conversation here. I'll have a conversation with David Williams offline about it, and obviously, I think you both should as well.
Well, then could I amend my budget with advisory then? That would be the purpose I would have to do.
I don't think that I would. I don't think I would do that until we have David Williams look into the situation.
I think that's fine.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening.
Yeah. All right. Anything else from advisory? All right. I think we're done with that then. Thank you, Heidi and Sharon.
Thank you.
All right. I believe what we have left is approval of previous meeting minutes. And then I also wanted to discuss a little bit about our schedule for the upcoming weeks. So let me see here. Brendan, you took the minutes last time, right?
Yeah.
I have too many windows open now. All right. All right. In the meantime, has everybody else looked at Brendan's minutes? Oh no, Brenda, did you only send it to me and Jane?
Yeah, so do you want me to share it?
Yeah, actually. Well, okay, would everybody prefer that we screen share it right now and look at it and approve it, or that we boot this to the next meeting? Just a straw poll, you just yell it out.
Next meeting.
Next meeting? Next meeting. All right, we'll do the next meeting. Can you, Brendan, can you send the minutes along to everybody in advisory though?
Yep, will do.
And then we'll do that next meeting. So we have, so on next week, we have a joint meeting with Dover Warrant and the regional schools. That's going to be at 7 o'clock. So that will be one Zoom meeting. And then after the regional schools discussion, Dover Warrant needs to keep going with theirs, with a Dover thing. And then we need to continue our meeting with the Sherborn Schools Committee. But we're going to have to leave that Zoom meeting and open another one. So there's going to be 2 Zoom links next week. So hopefully that's not too confusing. But next week is all going to be about the schools. And then on March 3rd and March 10th, we've sort of earmarked meetings for warrant article discussions. I think what I'll need to do is get a list of the currently proposed warrant articles from the select board's office, and then I'll contact all of the proponents. And I think Jane and I will sort out a schedule for them to present those. In the meantime, I think that we will probably, I'm going to guess one of those 2 meetings, hopefully we can get Dave Bento back to, after reworking the police budget. I don't know, Sharon, has Dave approached you, the Bento, to go over the
Yes.
personnel changes and stuff yet? So
Yep, he and I are actually meeting tomorrow afternoon.
Okay. So do you think that in either the March 3rd or March 10th meetings, it would be in a place where you could probably come back, or where Bento could come back and
Yeah.
represent to us?
Yeah, he's in really good shape, so we're gonna go over everything tomorrow, so yeah.
And
Sharon,
then,
I was looking at, excuse if I can just jump in on that one. I was looking at your schedule from May of the non-productive time for the police department. So that was very useful as I looked at the staffing. So if you still have that,
Okay.
you did a good job of breaking out both phase 1 and phase 2 with the true non-productive time, because
Yeah,
that
and we're gonna, yeah, that's something we're gonna work on, like massaging it. So yeah, I'll have that available for that meeting as well.
right. So we've got that. I'll have to probably reconvene with Steve Leahy to figure out if Sean Colleen's budgets needed to get reworked and represented to us or not. I'm not sure. But that'll probably happen in one of those two meetings if necessary. And then select board legal, which was supposed to be tonight, got pushed off. So that will also have to go into one of those two meetings. Now, part of the reason why our meeting schedule is so jammed up is because originally the town meeting was going to be April 27th, and so that necessitated that we have our public hearing on March 20th, which is a Saturday. So I don't know that the select board has officially decided yet, but we're most likely going to be pushing town meeting out by probably about a month. So into the end of May kind of time frame, which means that we will probably end up having our public hearing in the mid-April to end of April time frame. So that's probably looking at April 10th, 17th, or 24th. Hopefully not the 17th, because that is my son's birthday. So, but
he can come.
Yeah, he'll just Zoom bomb the entire time. So it does give us a little bit of breathing room. So we do have kind of an extra 2-3 weeks probably to hopefully not tack on any additional meetings, but if necessary, we can do that. But I did want everybody to try to sort of keep yourselves vaguely free for those mid to late April Saturdays. I know that can be challenging, especially because April 24th is, the tail end of school vacation week. But just try. And of course it'll be remote anyway. So even if you are on the Cape or whatever, you can just bring your computer along and be on a Zoom meeting all day on the Cape. So those are the things that I see upcoming. Does anybody have any particular questions or concerns about what our schedule looks like for the next couple of months?
A question, Steve, if we are going to push everything out in terms of the public hearing and so forth, is there a possibility that we might not have to jam all these things into March 3rd and 10th, and that we could, push that off a little bit?
Yeah, I think we probably would. I don't know, Sharon, you might know better just from attending their meetings, but the select board has not officially chosen a date for a town meeting, have they?
They're going to actually maybe vote on it tomorrow night.
Okay.
They're definitely talking end of March, just because the weather and having it at the
end of May, you mean?
I'm sorry.
Yeah, end of May. Okay, yeah, I am going to try to attend their meeting tomorrow, but tomorrow my wife also has Conservation Commission, so it makes it hard when we both have meetings at the same time. But I don't know, maybe Jane, if you could try to make an attempt to at least have an earbud in or something and listen. So once we know when officially the town meeting will be, then we'll rejigger our schedule, and then we'll push our public hearing out, and then probably stretch out these, add-on meetings and the warrant article meetings, so that we're not meeting till 10 p.m. every night. All right, sound good? All right, can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All right, hand vote, and we're out.
Thank you.
Bye,
Yep.
everybody.
Good night.